Folks, I'm sure you're wondering why we're sitting here in such festive holiday attire. My friend Seth is going to answer that question for you right now.
I would love to. Not only is it December, which is exciting in and of itself, but it's the Canvas Cutter 12 Days of Christmas giveaway. Started November 26th. It's going to run through December 31st. And Ben, we're giving away over $12,000 worth of prizes from some of the top companies in the outdoor industry.
Incredible.
And there's not going to be one or two winners, Ben. 36 people are going to win, Ben.
Wow.
36 people are going to win during the Canvas Cutter 12 Days of Christmas giveaway.
You know, some people might say that that's too many winners.
Indeed they might, but not here at Canvas Cutter. How can they get entered to win, Ben?
Well, it's really easy. If you want to get entered to win this, there's a couple ways that you can go about it. The first one is to join our insider program at canvascutter.com. And the second way is to make a qualifying purchase on our website and receive entries into this giveaway for everything bought from Black Friday up until the end of December.
Well, it sounds like if people want to learn more about this giveaway or get entered to win, they need to head over to canvascutter.com today and do just that.
Get over there, folks. Merry Christmas.
You can do it. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Happy Christmas.
Welcome to the Cuttercast Vlogcast. My name is Seth Larson. I hope you're doing well, and I hope you make time to go get entered into that giveaway. I mean, with $12,000 worth of prizes and 36 possible winners, you actually stand a solid chance of winning some sweet gear if you get entered. And all you have to do is sign up to be a Canvas Cutter Insider. That costs nothing. That's free. Or you could buy a sweet hat like this, a shirt. That gives you 5 entries each. You could buy a hat and a shirt. That's 10 entries into the giveaway. That's what I'm talking about. Now, January 1st through the 12th, we're going to announce the winners. There will be 3 winners each day. And maybe your name will be among them, but not if you don't get entered. So go get entered. Stop it. Do it. Now, don't be crazy. You got to do it. You can't win if you don't get entered. All right, enough of that. Now on today's episode has been a long time coming. Today's episode was on my list of possible episodes long before the Cuttercast Vlogcast was an actual living, live, working thing. And it was originally going to be a hard story to hear. It was going to be a rough one for our guest to tell. It was originally this episode was called The 3-Season Tragedy, and it's got a new name. Our guest is Canvas Cutter's own Ben Dettamanti. Now, a lot of you know him as Shedcrazy, as that's what he goes by on social media and his YouTube channel. Go check them all out if for some reason you haven't. A lot of things have happened since that original idea. A whole year worth of hunting's happened. And this 3-season tragedy is actually turned into a mule deer saga. So that's what it's called today. It's an incredible story. It's one that will make you feel gut punched at times, just like, oh, like painful. And then it's going to end on a high and leave you with some feel goods as it ends in a pretty incredible fashion. But without further ado, here's the mule deer saga with Canvas Cutter's Ben Dettamanti. My buddy Ben. Here he is.
Van Sleeping 101.
Van sleeping. You should teach a class on van sleeping.
Yeah.
Are you partially homeless? Let me show you how to sleep in a bed.
Recreationally homeless. I'm homeless for fun. It really spits in the eye of actual homelessness. My homeless privilege is showing.
There we go. Now that's better. Woo.
Fully recording.
Looking good. Fully recording.
Great.
So, folks, welcome to the Cuttercast Vlogcast. I hit record this time. You don't know it, but we were a solid halfway through this story when I looked down and realized the
my Zoom recorder wasn't recording. But welcome to the vlogcast. It's been a long time coming, but we got Ben Detta back in the studio.
Happy to be here.
He's been busy hunting and slaying animals and providing.
Yep, we've been chasing them this year a lot. And so we're doing some stuff for the 12 Days of Christmas, Canvas Cutter 12 Days of Christmas giveaway that we have. He had to come up and get a bow too. So, and it's been a while since we've seen one another. So, it's been good to get back.
Yeah. But we figured while we were doing all that, we'd throw down a vlogcast or two. Ben has a story I've been wanting him to do a vlogcast about, but when we first talked about it, it was still pretty raw.
It was a little emotional.
Pretty close to the surface.
For sure.
But this year, a year's gone by, and there's a legitimate, bright ending to the story.
Right.
It ends on a high, real good feel-goods, goosebumpy feel-goods. But the beginning of the story is rough, and it was hard. When you told me what had happened, we're going to get into it, I felt sick.
Yeah.
I felt sick for you because when you hunt an animal, especially as long as you did,
right,
and then things don't go as planned, it, as weird as it is, it's rough.
Yeah, you've been there.
I have. I got lucky. I drew an expo tag on the Manti, and I chased a really good bull we named Ted. The whole entire hunt, had a couple close calls. Opening day, I had a chance if I was more aggressive I was under 100 yards from him and then got to 100 yards with the bow. I should have gone after him a little bit more, but hindsight's 20/20. And I didn't end up getting him, and I was depressed. And then on the rifle hunt, a good dude's dad ended up shooting him, and he's a great guy. But that was hard. I still have a hard time looking at photos of him or the video that I got of him just because he was right there. And then you always have why didn't I do this?
Right. Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Yeah, I had a tree stand sitting in my garage that whole entire hunt. And he went through a meadow every single morning. Why didn't I put my tree stand up? I could stay in it all night long, and then in the morning when it comes through, I would get a shot, and everything. But hindsight's 20/20.
That's right.
So this story is based around the Utah mule deer hunt, though.
Yep. Yeah, generally
you had. It takes place over a couple years, and it started out because your brother Rocky. I don't know whether it was luck or whether just a hunch, but he ends up finding some deer in an area that turns out to be a great spot, and that's kind of how the saga begins.
Yeah, I think he was coyote hunting or spotlighting rabbits or something, but they were cruising one night, and quite a ways out in the middle of nowhere, they run across a little bit of water coming across the road. Just a spring, and it was in good deer country, so Rocky thought, we'll just throw a camera on it and see kind of what's showing up. And the first little while, all we really had was one buck show up, and it was a good buck. You could tell it was a nice heavy 4-point, but it wasn't anything that blew our minds, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was 2019. Rocky tried hunting it for a couple days that year, but there wasn't anything that interested me enough to go spend a ton of time.
Yeah, you already had a spot that you've hunted a lot.
Yeah, we have a stuff some higher elevation stuff that we really like. So, and we've been doing good on it, so we just kept hunting basically in that stuff. And I think 2020 came around, and that was last year. Mm-hmm. And that buck, which was just a nice 4-point, grew an extra, and he showed back up, and he turned into a tank.
A slot.
Yeah, we knew he had some potential, but I didn't think he was going to blow up the way he did, but he blew up. And the other thing that happened is 10 other bucks showed up there that hadn't been there previously, that had never hit our cameras. And I think it had to do with the water because all the other springs and stuff kind of had dried up. And that's a spot where they rely a lot on water that gets caught in catchments or rocks and stuff. And there hadn't been any rain. It was super powdery and dry out there. So I think this is the only place they could really get water. So we went from like having one deer that we were kind of interested in to like a bunch of
shooter bucks, yeah, in one spot.
Yeah, like way better potential than we had even in the stuff that we usually did good in. So we decided to kind of pull off and start hunting that really hard in 2020. And as soon as I started hunting it, I started making YouTube videos kind of about it. And in one of my YouTube videos, I showed trail camera photos of the bucks that we were seeing out there. And somebody immediately hit me up. He sent me an email. And he's like, hey, man, I think we're hunting the same deer. And he sent me some trail camera photos of those bucks. And I was like, of course, you know, because up until then we hadn't seen anyone.
Yeah.
Like no tracks, no traffic, nothing.
Yeah, I remember you talking to me about like, you've got a bunch of good bucks and it's in an area no one's hunting.
Right.
And in Utah, that's just like,
it's a rare gem.
Yeah, it's a rarity.
And like actually probably easy to figure out where it's at because all you have to do is go to like the 3 places where there's no people on that unit. And that's where it is. But we started working together with this guy. His name's Brad, and he's a great dude. Ended up being a really, really good friend of ours to this day. And like, just started working together with him. We like decided why would we work against each other?
Yeah.
And he was hunting these deer more like in their daytime area, and we were hunting them where they would go to get water at night. So, like we weren't really stepping on each other's toes, but we ended up working together and glassing for each other and stuff. So one of the bucks that we had there, we called the Ghost Buck. He's a tall, heavy 4-point, had a split brow tine, and he was a shooter like on all of our lists, you know?
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
I put a stalk on him. I got close on him a couple times, and Brad ended up killing that buck. I helped him recover the deer, and it was a really cool experience, just a tank of a buck.
Like the photo you sent me, it's deceiving.
Right.
Because you told me his body was just huge, and he's got big forks. He's tall, like he's a stud buck. But the photo doesn't do him justice.
No, not at all. You need to walk up on that deer. Like when I walked up on that deer, I was thinking, oh, you know, he's like a 140, 150, maybe like 160 type buck, like heavy, but just like nothing too special about him. And when I walked up on him, I was like, holy crap, because his deer is so tall, dude. His antlers are like stacked up and like just proportionally. I'd seen him next to other deer and stuff and knew he had a big body, but he was just like a Goliath bodied deer and just a stud of a buck. So that was awesome that we were able to help him get that deer killed in the archery.
Yeah.
I pretty much hunted the whole archery hunt except like maybe 1 or 2 days. I think I had to come up here, and then the big buck, the inline buck, ended up hitting our camera that day, the day I was gone. And then I elk hunted, I think, maybe 1 or 2 days, and same story. He came and hit our cameras when I was elk hunting. So archery, towards the end of it, I had to go to Kentucky because we'd bought a whitetail lease out there.
Well, I remember, too, during the archery, you had been sitting in, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, yeah,
you had been sitting in your blind, like, all day long.
Yeah.
Like sweating your cojones off.
Yep.
And then you decided to go sit in the blind Rocky would sit
right,
in.
in Brad's blind. Yep.
In Brad's blind, sorry. And then that buck showed up that morning at the spot that you always sat.
Yeah. He dodged me perfectly. Like every time I wasn't there, he would show up, and I'm like, there had to be something to that, right? Like maybe he could smell me when I was in there. Maybe there was something like he could check with the wind or the trail I walked in. So he was on to me. Whatever it was, like he had me figured out.
Yeah.
Whenever I wasn't there, he would show up. So I went to Kentucky towards the end of the hunt, and I killed a whitetail. And Rocky ended up killing another buck that I'd been close on that was running around, probably the second best buck out there. But just this really wide, pretty buck. Had some trash on his bases and stuff, like 31-inch wide deer. But like a tank.
He's a stud buck. Yeah.
So he killed that one. So we had, a couple of the better deer dead. Another buck that showed up, we started calling Pegasus, which is like a decent nickname, right? Because he had these huge double cheaters like off his main beams, big flyers, where like they look like wings, Pegasus. Yeah. And then it got shortened to Peggy.
Yeah, because no one's going to be like Pegasus every time. Of course, it will go down to Peggy.
And the first time we saw him on camera, dude, we had a night velvet shot of him. And the thing about this buck is his antlers just flare. Like he shows everything, and we're like, oh my gosh, that deer is huge. And then I ended up seeing him in person. I'm like, oh, there's a dink, dude. Like, he's got nothing going on. But anyway, he ran around with all those same bucks. And so we had a few potential shooters, but, like, I was keyed in on the inline buck, dude. I wanted him so bad. I knew he was, like, heads and tails bigger than all those other deer. And so I, like, hunted my guts off for him. I hunted the whole archery. I didn't hunt the opener of the muzzleloader. I went with Troy, and we hunted some other deer. And then He, of course, showed up on the camera when I wasn't
naturally,
there.
yeah.
Like 9 in the morning, dude.
Oh
He just
my
like
gosh.
stood around for like 20 minutes and drank.
Oh my gosh.
And I had moved my ground blind, so I would have been
Such
a
a
couple hundred
punk.
yards off the water, like maybe 100 yards off the water. So if he would have came, I would have just aced him. But
Yeah.
anyway, I hunted the whole muzzleloader hunt. I took my boys out there several times. We saw some of the other deer, but nothing that I wanted to shoot. We hunted the whole early rifle. I saw that buck that I sent you that grainy photo of
Yep.
that I glassed one time.
Ginormous. I'm at my boy's soccer game. You send me this grainy video, grainy photo. And dude, just from the slight movements in the video, like he looked like he had solid tines.
Yeah.
And he was wide. And I was just like, dude, Ben, that is a big deer.
Yeah, and I tried to kill that deer just because, like, I mean, because he was huge, but I hadn't been able to find the inline buck, hadn't been able to see him. Like, he would come and go. But I tried to kill that deer that day, and I never did. Never could find him again after I got that video.
No.
Because knowing what I know now, I could have killed him that day. But I just didn't have enough experience with that little part of the area to know what the deer were doing.
Yeah.
And that actually ended up becoming kind of our bread and butter later on, is that little spot where I saw that deer. But anyway, I hunted the whole muzzleloader. I hunted the whole early rifle. I passed on the Peggy buck once in the muzzleloader and once in the early rifle.
Which isn't a waitress at Denny's.
Right.
It's just a deer named Peggy.
Deer named Peggy. And he ended up breaking his back fork off, I think, during the rifle hunt. So it made him easier pass, too. So I kept going out there, and I went out there, I think when it was all said and done, I went out there 31 days. And some of those times it was like twice in a day.
Yeah.
So like I drove out there probably 50 plus times. And I just was like obsessed with this. Like neglecting all my other hunts, neglecting all my home responsibilities.
Well, because the buck's egging it on too.
And yeah,
he's just toying with you. He keeps showing up when you're not there.
Yeah.
He keeps showing up in a spot that you've set for days and days.
Yep.
And then the one day you don't, he shows up.
Yeah, and during all this time, I never laid eyes on him. Like, I've never seen this deer. I just know that he's there. I've seen his tracks. I've backtracked him to try to see where he comes from, to try to jump him. And it seemed like he's always coming from a different place. Anyway, it just didn't make any sense to me. So late rifle rolls around. I hunted the opener. I hunted a couple days, and then I went out one day, and I hunted the evening and decided just to sleep out there in my truck to get up and hunt the next day. And we haven't really been seeing hunters. Like, I've seen a couple boot tracks around, so I think there's a couple other guys hunting it in the late rifle, but nothing that I'm concerned about. So I go to bed that night, and I wake up, and it's like maybe an hour before daylight, and I hear a four-wheeler go right by my truck, up the road. And I'm like, why would anybody be riding a four-wheeler out here at 5? Like, they got to be hunting.
Yeah.
So I get all my stuff on, and I decided that day to go a little bit different, go about it a little bit different, and I went right to the water, thinking that I could catch these deer coming off the water. And it worked. I did. Like, I got to the water like every other day I've hunted out there, and all of a sudden I look on the skyline and I got deer. So I'm looking through my binoculars, and I look, and the inline buck's there.
Oh my gosh.
He's with the Peggy buck, a couple of the other bucks, and he's skylined it like 450 yards. And like, he kind of goes down the ridge, and I'm like, I can shoot him right now. So I get on my gun, I get on my bipod, I look through the scope, I find the ridge in the scope, and he's gone. I'm like, oh, he's not there anymore. He must have topped out and went over. So I'm like, shoot, all right, I have to make a big loop around and everything. So I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to go about it. And then I pull my binoculars, and he's still standing there. I'm like, oh, no, I looked at the wrong ridge through my scope.
Oh, my gosh.
So I get back on my gun. I get in my scope, and I get him in my scope, but all I can see is his butt and his antlers, and he's about to top over the ridge. He's fully skylined. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I hate that shot. Like, I would just be hoping to get it where it needed to go. I would basically be trying to shoot him in the butt. I'm like, so I'm not going to take that shot. So they go over the hill, and I'm like, that's okay. I know where they're going. I think I can get up there. So I throw all my stuff together, throw my pack together. I have to run up a giant ridge. So I get up this ridge, I get to the top, and I'm like sweating out of breath, and I look, and there's a dude in orange, like right where I topped out, like he's right below me. And he sees me, and he turns around and walks straight down the hill. I'm like, oh, that's weird. I've never seen hunters. But whatever. He looks like he's going the other way. In my mind, I'm like, maybe he's following those deer, maybe he's not. But he's not. Whatever, I can't worry about him. I just got to try to kill these deer. So I head to the west, and I'm looking into a canyon that I have very, very rarely hunted, but I can tell that's where the bucks went from these tracks. So I sit down on the ridge, I get on my tripod, I start glassing over the hillside, glassing, and all of a sudden I pick up one of the bucks that was with him in the morning, which is this Peggy buck. I see all the other bucks, but I can't see the big deer. And I'm looking, and for probably 20 minutes I look at this herd of bucks, and I can't see the big deer at all. So I'm like, well, he must have split off from him. He's not there. My gun's sitting down. I've dialed. I've ranged him. Like, my gun's ready to shoot right next to me in case he happens to be there. And nothing. So I'm sitting on this hill debating, like, what to do next.
Well, and your adrenaline had to have been going, too, because after the archery hunt, muzzleloader hunt, now rifle, where you can reach out and touch something, like, you finally actually laid eyes on him.
Yeah.
Like, you saw him. He was right there. Had a shot, then didn't have a shot, like, so, and then hiking too, like, you had to been psyched, and now you've been watching him for a while, and
yeah,
where is he at?
Yep, the adrenaline's starting to die off. I'm kind of convincing myself that he's not there. So I'm sitting there on the ridge, and then I hear rocks roll behind me. I turn around, and there's a kid just, like, sprinting towards me, and I'm like, what the heck, what's going on? And he's just, like, on a dead run right towards me, and, like, the way he was running, I thought he was coming to tell me something, or, like, coming to get my attention, you know?
Yeah.
So he runs down the ridge, and I can see he's talking on the radio and running, and I'm like, okay, I'm like, well, he's probably sees those deer, but I'm like, it doesn't matter, he can shoot one of those deer.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. So I'm, like, gonna go stand up and talk to the kid, right? So I stand up and I start walking towards him, and as soon as I walk like 4 steps, I can see the big buck.
Oh my gosh.
He's on the hill. He's about 300 yards below the other deer, but where I was sitting, set up, he was hidden by a pine tree, like right in between me and him. There was a tree.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm like, shiz, now it's freaking go time, right? So, like, a lot of scenarios you would have been like, oh, who's deer? And I'm like, whatever. I put in my whole life into this deer. I'm gonna shoot him.
Yeah.
So the kid gets to the ridge about the time we're getting on our guns at the same time. He's like 20 yards away from me. I'm a fast shooter. I find stuff and I shoot quick. Like, I'm not worried. I get on my gun. I get settled. I look at him through the scope. I glance over at this other kid, you know, and he's looking through his scope, and I'm like, okay, we're good. I settle my crosshairs, and I start to squeeze. I hear boom, and I'm like, there's no way he just shot that fast. But I watch, in my crosshairs, I watch that deer hump up.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, there is no way that just happened. And he hit it. Yeah, he hit it like mid-body, like thumped it. And this, like, it was 500.
This is like, and seconds too. Like, you got there and you're both setting up.
He shot within 5 seconds of being on the ground.
Oh my God.
And like 544 yards. So this is not a chip shot, right?
Oh my
and like smacks it. And I get back on, I'm watching through the scope. I'm like, do I shoot? I'm like, well, no, like, he's hit it now. Like, it's his deer. But I look through the scope and boom, he shoots again, misses. Boom, shoots again, and the deer's dead, like, falls down.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah.
Like,
oh my gosh.
And like, I don't know, I didn't know what to do. So I got up, went over, gave the kid a hug, a high five. I'm like, dude, it's a freaking stud. Like, what can I?
Oh my gosh, dude. Anybody who's listening to this, who's spent months like scouting, then months actually hunting, and not just on the weekend,
Right.
like
it was a full
every day, all week long, to have that buck, that dream, that thing you've been chasing, that you want, that you've dreamt about, the scenarios you've created in your mind, like right there, and then somebody just show up that day 20 yards away from you, 20 feet from you, and shoot it out from underneath you. Like, it's public land.
For sure.
You can do that all day long.
Yep.
And he had no idea your story or your saga with this deer at all.
No, which doesn't matter.
Which doesn't matter. From your perspective, though,
just
that is
gut-wrenching,
like
man.
Legit gut-wrenching.
Yeah.
Like, go home, get in fetal position, and like cry it out for a while.
Well, that's how I felt. Like, I didn't know what else to do. Like, I told him, good job, man. I'm like, dude, you know what you killed? And he's like, just the wide buck. I don't know. I was like, showed him trail camera pictures of it and stuff. And I was like, do you care if I go look at it? And he's like, no, let's go. So we walked over there. I looked at the buck. He was cool as can be, you know, like, it's public land hunting. It is what it is. Like, he shot quick and he got it killed. Like, I had to give that kid props because most people aren't making that shot, period.
No, yeah.
And to make it in the time that he made it, then like,
super impressive.
it was good shooting, and he knew where to be and everything. Like, it is what it is. But yeah, so I got to go look at it on the ground, like pick it up. I even took pictures and stuff for him and his dad when his dad got over there. And dude, it just sucked, man. It sucked so bad. But I mean, give the kid props. Is what it is. So once that deer was dead, I was like, screw it. I'm not even gonna hunt anymore. I don't care. Like,
oh my gosh,
I'm just gonna go home and give up because I was just over it and done. Like, just
that's
wreck,
so
dude.
depressing, dude. That is so hard.
So anyway,
it's crazy.
I decided to go home, and my buddy Brad, who I'd met out there, called me, and he's like, dude, let's go try to hunt these other deer. And I'm like, whatever, let's go try it. So him and Tyler Bowler, who's another buddy of mine, went out, and I ended up killing a pretty nice deer like 2 days later. It's a good deer, like a big, heavy 4-point, like nothing to, I would have probably been pretty stoked if it wasn't for the scenario, right?
Ginormous inline.
And maybe I didn't appreciate that deer enough because it's a nice deer. Anyway, that season ended, and it was just kind of like.
Do you know what the inline scored?
He's 197.
Oh!
Yeah. So the thing about this deer too, like, is he just had everything, dude. Everything I liked. He was 32 inches wide, which is like a good wide buck, But his G3s and his G4s, dude, like his 4s are so palmated, they're so webbed out. Like, that kid had a Copenhagen can, and you could put that Copenhagen can, sit it on top of his G4.
Oh my god!
It was so bladed, like it was. Oh, anyway, he's a sick buck. You guys could see him on Instagram. And the kid that killed him, his name's Colin Hutch, and Hutchinson, I guess is his last name. Hutchings or Hutchinson, but he's from St. George. And he was super cool about the whole thing, man. He was like even apologetic in a way, like, oh, it sucks, man. He was understanding, but that's just the game,
Yeah, that's public land hunting.
It is what it is, and props to him for getting it done in 1 day instead of 30, But anyway, so yeah, the buck was sweet and a stud, and it is what it is. So,
and you killed a good buck, but
right.
Like you said, it's just like you're so done,
right,
from what happened before. It's really hard to appreciate even a good buck.
Yeah, and out of all the deer that we had out there, like, there was nothing that I was super stoked to go out and hunt anymore for this coming year. Like, I figured, I was like, I don't even probably hunt out there. There's not a buck I even care about. This Peggy buck, I kind of thought he was old and regressed because, I figured he was going downhill. And that was the only deer that I really thought maybe would be anything besides that one blurry buck that I glassed. So I wasn't even stoked to come hunt it the next year. So the next year rolls around. We didn't run cameras. Just didn't really
see the need.
Yeah.
Like, you could just go glass or.
Yeah. So we decided me and Rocky decided to go out there and just check it right before the archery. And we're like, we'll see if there's deer. We'll see what showed up. And we go out there, and we decided to kind of hang a little bit more to the east of where we'd been hunting, because we figured that was our mistake with the inline buck, is that he was probably to the east of us, and we never really figured that out. Mm-hmm. He ended up getting killed east of where we were hunting him. Anyway, so we started there. We got up on the glassing point, started glassing, and all of a sudden, like, we picked up a handful of bucks, which we started trying to recognize.
Oh, all right.
Bucks from last year. The one buck we called the Dork, which was a spike by 2 last year. We saw him right away. We saw the 3x4 and a couple other decent deer, but nothing like, oh man, we got to kill him.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, this buck walks out. We're like, what the heck deer is that? Like, where the heck has that deer been? He's super wide, super laid out, like kind of willow horned, but has an inline on the one side and then a cheater on his other side. And then, but just has like this look, and like, like, where the hell has that deer been? And all of a sudden, like, we're watching him, filming him and everything. We go home and we have tons of video of him. The deer comes across and beds right underneath us. He beds like 300 yards below us.
You text me that day and you're like, dude, they just walked right towards us and bedded right underneath us.
This is like 2 days before the start of the archery. So I'm like, we have to, try to kill this deer because he's big.
Yeah.
And the other deer that was with him was the buck that I got the blurry video of. And he had regressed. He's an old buck, but same frame shape, still a big deer, gnarly, heavy, weird, like 3x5 frame. Like, he's actually a 4x5, but weird frame and stuff. So we're like, those 2 deer are there. Like, oh, okay, like maybe there is something worth spending some time on this year.
Yeah.
So we dove into them and we started hunting them this year. And we like went right back into the old routine of spending like entirely too much time out there hunting. Like, I told myself, I'm going to have fun this year. I'm going to take it a little bit more easy. Like, I'm not going to go out there and hunt just one spot day after day after day after day. And we immediately just like went right back to it. Like falling into the same routine of just glassing off the same knob every single day. So we pretty much hunted the whole archery hunt out there. We saw this buck almost every single day. And it took us a couple days to realize that it was the same deer that was Peggy.
Peggy.
Right? And I'm like, great, he's got the stupidest nickname ever, and it's the deer we're going to be spending all our time on this year. But, yeah, I was blown away that he'd grown so much and that, like, he was actually impressive looking. So we started hunting him in the archery. We hunted him, and, like, I probably put
a lot, Ben.
Yeah. I stalked him like 20 times.
Like, you were canceling other life matters because he was
all kinds of trips. I was supposed to go on other hunts, and I'm like, I can't go. I got to try to kill this deer. So I got under 100 yards 7 times in the archery.
Oh my gosh.
I had several close calls. One where I was just like, for sure I'm going to kill this deer. Like, we were glassing him up like 2 miles away, right? Had a super high glassing point. We were hiking every day. We'd glass him super far away, and I'd make these way long stalks on him. And it was like 95 degrees, super hot. This one day, I decided I'm going stupid, right? Like, I glassed him up way far away, like as far away as we could see him. And I like, all right, I'm going to drop off the ledges. I'm going to make a huge loop behind him and come back up the ledges. Like, there's no way he's going to be able to win me. I'm going to be in a totally different canyon until I get close. Made this huge stalk. It took me from like we glassed him at first light, and like I got within 100 yards of him at like 11 a.m. And I'm sneaking, and like he's feeding. He has no idea I'm there. He's like, I can see his antler tips around the ridge. I get to like 75. I'm like, oh, this is happening. Finally, it's going to happen. And I get in to like 60 and like to 55, and then all the does start feeding out. All the little bucks start feeding out. I'm clipped on, like I'm ready. And my little brother calls me, and he's like, he's running. I'm like, what the hell? How? He's like, he's running. He's running the other way. He's like, he's clear out in the flat. He's 500 yards away from you now. And I'm like, what?
What
he's
on
like,
earth?
And I could have killed every single other deer that was there, and he just motored. And then another day, I stalked him into this canyon. And like I'm like looking down, and there's deer all over in this canyon. Every deer in the canyon's in bow range. I'm like on the rim of this canyon. They're all like 20 to 70 yards. Everything. And then I look, and he's looked like 150 yards away, and he has me pegged. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's always him. Like, and he was just
super smart.
Couldn't figure him out. Couldn't do it. I set up a tree saddle for him. He walked up this one draw like 5 days. So I set a tree saddle, and he never came through. Anyway, he just outsmarted me straight up in the bow hunt. So in the muzzleloader, we went back in there, and Rocky drew a limited entry muzzleloader elk tag. Mm-hmm. Killed his bull, and basically I got home at 5 a.m. I drove the whole night, got home at 5 a.m., the opener of the muzzleloader, and I just slept in. Got up on the muzzleloader. The second day of the muzzleloader, I snuck in. I glassed him up, and I snuck into like 155 yards. So I have him. He's looking at me at 155. I can see him, but no other deer. I don't know where they are.
Yeah.
I put my gun in a clamp, and I'm just sitting there watching him, like waiting. Like I feel lethal as can be with my muzzleloader at 150, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm waiting, and he's facing to the left. And I have the opening to the left range. My crosshairs are there. Everything's totally ready. I'm like, I'm going to kill him as soon as he goes to that opening. Wait. I kneel for like a half hour waiting for him to walk to the left. And then out of nowhere, he flips and walks to the right. So I loosen my tripod. I move over this way, and there's one gap in a canyon. He's about to go into the canyon. So it's like I have to shoot him in that gap. And he just runs right through that gap. So right when I'm turning like this, he hesitates at the edge of the canyon for 1 second, and I shoot at 150. And as soon as I pull the trigger, I'm like, I think I missed. Like, didn't feel like a great shot. I wasn't fully steady, didn't really want to pull the trigger yet. And Rocky's like, what happened? I'm like, I don't know, dude. He's like, oh, he's running out in the flat. And that deer's like 1,000 yards away, just cooking. And I'm like, it's over. Like, it's over. Like, he's got shot at with a gun. He's going to be gone.
Yeah.
So that didn't pan. I went back out there, and we actually glassed him up that evening, way on the other end of the world. I put a move on him, but I never did get anywhere with it. Rocky could see him spotting on the hill. I couldn't see him when I got down in there with him. And then we couldn't find him for like 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
And I was like, he's gone. We're never going to see him again. Like, it's going to be over. And I was worried that we weren't going to be able to turn him up again. And I was nervous to let it go to the rifle for obvious reasons, just like with the overshadowing of what
PTSD from the prior year.
And we also started seeing that kid, Colin, who'd killed the big buck. His dad showed up out there and was glassing. We'd see him out there glassing. One day we went out there and he was on the glassing point that we usually glass from. So then there's this added level of panic.
Yeah.
So we want to get this deer killed. Rocky's like pretty much going insane, just from like, he's like, I can't go out there and look at that stupid hill again. And like, props to him for going with me all these days. You know? I mean, it's also his job, but like, not having, he had a tag too, and he'd put some stocks on some critters and stuff, but that'll come into play at a very brief point later in the story. Stay tuned. So the day that we actually made it happen, we went out there on the glassing point, and it was a cool day. It was a nice day, kind of overcast. We got to the glassing point, and which is the only place we have cell service really out there. And we got a phone call from my dad, and it was right after first light. We hadn't seen any deer. We were just kind of like starting to glass. And he told us that my grandpa had passed away. And
Grandpa, you're very close. Right?
Yeah, yep. He lives, grew up in the same town as us. We always helped him with cows. He's somebody that we would go to his cabin and hunt. Just somebody I always look up to, like a real hero of mine. He started the business that my dad ran for my whole childhood, pretty much, or a good chunk of it, where I worked for 8 years. So anyway, somebody who's been very like monumental in who I am. So he passed away, and we knew that he was sick. He'd been having some problems. The last we'd heard, he was gonna probably not make it too much longer, but we didn't expect it to be so soon.
Yeah.
So we got a phone call, got that call from my dad. I talked to him for a minute, and then got off the phone with him. Rocky talked to him for a minute, and we were just kind of sitting there talking, obviously like sad, upset, and then just kind of sharing memories about my grandpa and talking about him and stuff, and just kind of up in the air about what to do. And we were pretty much going to bag it and just go home and just spend time with family for the day. And as we're, having this conversation about what we're going to do, I looked out in the place, out in the flat out there, and I'm like, oh, we got deer. And I'm like, oh, it's the dork buck and the 3x4, which were deer that we'd been seeing really consistently. And they weren't in the usual place, but they were like on a beeline towards us. And usually these deer, they just kind of stand around until the sun hits them, and then they go to bed. Mm-hmm. But this was before the sun had hit anything.
Yeah.
And they were just running right towards us, coming right towards us. So they get down in the flataways and everything, and then I see a little movement behind them, and out pops another buck behind them. And I'm like, what buck is that? And I see him come up over the hill, and Rocky's like, oh, that's Peggy. That's our deer. And I'm like, oh, my gosh, there he is. I'm like, well, thinking about it, I'm like, I know my grandpa would be like, go kill that thing right now.
Yeah.
So I was like, dude, I was so wound up. I've gone after this deer so many times at this point, dude, but for whatever reason, I was just like wound. I was so like, I was like trying to get my stuff ready to go put this stock on him.
Emotionally charged, man.
Yeah, and he's like a couple 1,000 yards away, but coming towards us. And we know like what these deer do. They come straight towards us. They either go up the one canyon or they'll go out, to the east and bed. But I knew basically where he was going to go. So I grabbed my muzzle loader, I grabbed my pack, and just motored. Dropped down off the point, and I got out in the flat. And the way we run the system out there typically is I'll go down in the flat or towards the deer are, and I'll get to a certain point in the stalk and then communicate with Rocky to kind of see what the deer are doing. So when I got to that point, I called Rocky, and I'm like, hey, where are these deer at? And he's like, dude, they're almost to you, like right now. Like they're to you. And I'm like, what? Because they had been thousands of yards away.
Yeah.
So right when he said that, I look over, and I'm like, oh, I can see one of these deer. I pull up my binoculars. I'm like, what deer is that? I'm like, that's the dork buck. Okay. And I'm like, where is Peggy from the dork buck? And he's like, he's about to walk out right where that deer just did. And I range him, and it's 180 yards. And I'm like, oh geez, it's go time. Throw out my tripod, get on my gun, put my gun in the clamp. I'm kneeling. Everything's good. And like right as soon as I get set up, that deer walks into my sight picture in my scope. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, okay, he's 180. I'm sighted for 150. I got to hold a little bit high. So I put the hash mark on him that I wanted to shoot. And I go to shoot. Boom. And I just did not feel like a good shot again. I'm like, what is going on? But I saw the deer drop. Like, saw him drop down and then start running again and running again. And I see him, and like he's kind of running through the flat. He drops into this little, like a cut. And he doesn't come out. And where it was, I knew I'd be able to see him if he popped out of it. Saw all the other deer come out, and I'm like, oh, he stayed in there. So I went sneaking over towards the cut. I left my tripod and my pack sitting there, which would turn into a bit of a saga later to find because I just abandoned him in the middle of this oak patch, basically. And I go over there, and I walk to the very edge, and I look in, and this deer's like 20 yards below me, and sees me and takes off on a dead run. I can see he's hitting his front leg, like his front shoulder. Mm-hmm. So he can't really go that good. So I basically take a running shot at him about 60 yards as he goes up the other side. I shoot over his back, offhand, miss him. And then I'm just like, oh no, like what just happened? Like he's going to be gone. Yeah. So I go over, get on his track. There's some blood there. And he's leaving kind of a unique track because he's going with a broken leg. Yeah. And I start following him, and I go down. And I'm trying to figure out if he crossed the road or not because he doesn't like to cross that road, especially when he gets bumped. He never crosses the road. He usually cuts back the other way. It took me forever to figure it out, and I finally found a little bit of blood in the road. And then I found his track on the other side of the road. And I started tracking him up the draw, and I was just on a little bit of blood and on a track for like an hour. And it was just like, you never catch up to him, it seems like in that scenario. So everything's going through my head. I'm like, I don't know if we're ever going to be able to like get this done. And I drop into the wash. I don't have any cell phone service, nothing. Like, I don't know what's going on. I come up out of the wash and my phone rings, and Rocky's glassing up on the point for me, And I pick up the phone. I'm like, dude, I cannot find this deer. And he's like, he's going across the hill right now. He's like, I can see him. Like, he's going to come out. So I hang up. I look up the hill, and I can just see a glimpse of his antler. But that's kind of like brush and stuff to me. So I need to get up one more level. So I run up one more level. And I don't know where the deer is. I don't know, like, what's going on. I just know, like, I can actually now see the hill that he's on. And I look, and he comes across the open face at, like, 75 yards. And he's still moving pretty good. But he kind of comes out in the open and stops and looks at me for a second. And I pulled up and just dead X'd him right behind the shoulder, and he just dropped in his tracks. And I was just like, oh, my gosh. It was such an emotional, like, just a dump. I can hear Rocky on the point. He's, like... 1,000 yards away, and I can hear him, just yelling, and I was just sat down on the ground, dude, and like honestly, I just cried. Yeah, like it was such an emotional moment, like having everything leading up to that, and then like everything that had happened that day, it just everything, man. It felt like the dam broke. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And walking up on that deer was super. It was weirdly like anticlimactic, Yeah. Because we put so much work into this deer and into those deer and into
so much effort for not just this year, all of last year. And then the disappointments and then the emotional roller coaster of the morning too, finding out about your grandpa passing away and then there he is. He's just there now.
He's dead. And it's like this deer that we've looked at for, we've analyzed, we watched countless hours of video, countless stalks, and he's there. He's on the ground in front of me. And this is like 6 months of my life, over 2 years that we've spent out there. And to have this buck dead, it was just crazy. It was a crazy feeling. It was just surreal. I just sat on the ground and looked at him for like 2 hours. And Rocky got all the stuff gathered up, and he came down off the hill, and I had to go find my tripod and my backpack. That took forever because I just dropped them like 2 miles from where the deer ended up dead. Oh my gosh. And then man, it was just crazy. But I just felt like there was something bigger at play there. Like I just felt like that was the reason we were able to get it done that day, and it was able to come together. And I called my dad on the phone, and I'm like, well, we killed him. We killed this buck. And he kind of knew a little bit about the saga that had gone on and stuff. He's like, do you see an old man out there helping you? I said, it kind of felt like that.
Kind of felt really like it.
But it was cool. And it was cool to close that like book, you know?
Yeah.
It was my second year of dedicated. So, I mean, I can't go back out and hunt out there for at least 2 years. And it just felt like a good, kind of like a stamp on that whole story. And Rocky ended up killing the dork buck like 3 days later or something. On accident.
Yeah.
So he tried to shoot the buck that we call the 3x4, which I'm glad he didn't shoot the 3x4 because it's a potential. The deer has potential, you know, but he went to shoot it, and there was like 4 bucks on the hill, you know, and he shoots, boom, and I'm like, I think you missed. He's like, whatever deer I hit, I think it died. So I'm like, well, go walk over by those bushes and look, and there's the dork dead. It's this goofy looking 2-point, and like,
hey, if you're gonna shoot a 2-point, it's the one to go.
He's sweet. Yeah, he's got a split main, like a double main beam. He splits right at his base. He's a sweet buck, but yeah, like that spot is just something else. Like it's the spot that for sure got me like more hooked on trying to kill a specific deer, because we've always hunted deer really hard. But we're never targeting, like we have in the past targeted specific bucks, but it's like we can't really see them that much.
Yeah.
Like you'll see them a few times during archery and hope to run into them during the muzzleloader. And they might show up on your camera here and your camera there, you know. But these deer, like we had daily history with these deer for like 2 years.
Yeah.
Like we would see them and know where they were, and we'd check this camera. Oh, they were here last night. Oh, we saw them here this morning. And then it's this huge puzzle and you're trying to figure it all out. So to finally like kill what was like probably one of my better bucks ever. It was just super cool.
Yeah, and the whole story, the whole moment of it, where like Peggy was around last year, and then you had that saga, and like with your grandpa, and dude, I've heard several stories of people like losing their dad and going out hunting and like feeling they're there and like helping them out, or like getting something done and just being like, yeah, there's something more there. Yeah. I don't know whether it's like a part of the mourning process or what, but it's, I think it's awesome, dude. I think it's incredible. And like the chances, all the times you guys have gone out there and it didn't happen, to have the terrible news that you got and then to have it happen is just like such an emotional dump for sure.
Yeah, it's like he
such
knew
a
I
crazy
needed
ending.
It's like he knew I needed a gift or a little hand. You know? So he threw me one last. Well, hopefully it's not the last one. Hopefully we keep killing big stuff.
Please don't let it be the last one.
No, but he loved to hunt, man. He loved it. That was his thing. Like he was a deer hunter and he was an old cowboy, like old cowhand, and that's who he was. That's what he looked forward to. When we got together with him, that's what we talked about. When I was a little kid, man, he would save me all the hunting magazines. He had subscriptions to every one. I'd go over to their house for anything. He'd send me home with just a stack of like American Hunter and Outdoor Life and Field and Stream and American Rifleman and all these magazines, and I would just consume that when I was a kid. So it was cool, and I'm gonna miss like hunting and getting to share those memories and stuff with him. But he was great, like a great example.
Yeah.
It was cool.
Well, he sounded awesome just from what you've told me about him and our long drives to Arizona and everything. And like, what a tough dude.
Yeah, he
like
was.
Cancer, broken back, like, and still out pushing cows and
yeah, he got
living life,
banged up all the time, and he just kept going, man. And he killed a Rocky Mountain Bighorn last year.
Yeah,
and he's just an old killer. He just can't stop. He was talking about going sheep hunting this year. He wanted to go sheep hunting again. I wanted to go on odd ads or something. So, but yeah, man, it was cool, and it's a cool story and stuff. And I'm glad that we can move on from that chapter of my life and I can quit like spending my whole life in that damn cedar patch.
In that cedar patch,
trying to kill freaking no deer.
Well, it's an awesome story, and it's a stud buck. Thanks. So thanks for sharing it with us. And plus, you know, in a very real way, like it's a super personal one at many levels. So I think it's one though that people can hopefully relate to or glean from, but hope so. Thanks for sharing it, amigo.
Yep.
All right. I don't know what you say after that. Like, whew. What a crazy
2 years worth of hunting. Like to go from like horrible heartbreak, gut punch, dreams ripped away from you, right in front of you, to this crazy powerful experience of losing your grandfather, finding out about that, and then moments later having another dream actually come true and happen in a very crazy way. Thank you, Ben, for coming on and sharing that with us. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you do us a favor, make sure to give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, subscribe, give us a follow. We appreciate all of you for watching and listening wherever you might do so. And until next time, bye.